Cheers. Hey, folks. Welcome. Now, as it is Cinco de Mayo, I wanted to let you know that I am celebrating a little bit. And by celebrating, I mean I'm having some tea. That's right. There's been some curiosity about whether or not this is actually a tea mug or a beer mug. Well, obviously, this is a tea mug because it's got a tea bag in it. I mean, I wouldn't drink beer while teaching. At any rate, I bet most of you, not to knock you or anything, but I bet most of you don't even know what the Cinco de Mayo celebration is about. Bet you've never heard of the town of Puebla, or know who the Mexicans were fighting, or any of that stuff. So you should figure that out, just in case somebody challenges you to barroom trivia at some point in your life. Anyway, I definitely digress. Today we're going to be talking about chapter 26 of To Kill a Mockingbird. Can you read it? Is that big enough for you? All right. Chapter 26 is a pretty short chapter, much like chapter 25 was. But this time, I'm not going to tell you what the main point is up front. I want you to try to think of what the theme is on your own. So as I'm reading, in previous chapters, we've had things like racism, discrimination, we've had judgment, we've had hypocrisy, we've had, in the previous chapter, we just had weighing the truth. Okay, I want you to listen to this chapter and try to figure out, what do you think the overarching message is that Harper Lee is trying to give to the reader to at least make you think about? Because that's what this book does. Harper Lee does an amazing job of just sprinkling social topics in there, just enough to make you think about it a little bit, make you question how you feel or react when that sort of situation comes up, or what your thoughts are on it. So without further ado, I'm going to read chapter 26 to you, okay? School started, and so did the daily trips past the Radley place. Jem was in 7th grade and went to high school, beyond the grammar school building. I was in the 3rd grade, and our routines were so different I only walked to school with Jem in the morning and saw him at meal times. He went out for football, but was too slender and too young yet to do anything but carry the team water buckets. This he did with enthusiasm. Most afternoons, he was seldom home before dark. The Radley place had ceased to terrify me, but it was no less gloomy, no less chilly under the great oaks, and no less uninviting. Mr. Nathan Radley could still be seen on a clear day walking to and from town. We knew Boo was there for the same old reason. Nobody had seen him carried out yet. I sometimes felt a twinge of remorse when passing the old place at ever having taken part in what must have been sheer torment to Arthur Radley. What reasonable recluse wants children peeping through his shutters, delivering greetings on the end of fishing poles, wandering in his collards at night? That's interesting because when they were younger, they were trying to empathize with Boo, but their struggle was that they were looking at it from their own perspective and thinking if they were kids and they were locked up in that gloomy building, then they would totally want somebody to try to communicate with them. But now Scout's a little bit more mature. She's a 3rd grader, okay? She's not super old, but she's starting to understand that there are different ways of viewing the world. And part of that came from the Tom Robinson trial. Like, obviously, she and Jem had viewed the world in one way because of Atticus, and then that way of viewing the world was just like smashed in the face with a proverbial hammer, and they realized not everybody sees the world the way that we do. So now Scout is starting to think like, well, if I was a recluse or an introvert like Arthur Radley, how would I feel about a bunch of kids trying to poke at me and try to bug me? And honestly, that's a pretty good life skill to have. It's unfortunate that she had to go through trauma in order to get to that point, but it's still a positive thing to come out of it. All right, page 2. We're on page 278, by the way. And yet I remembered 2 Indian head pennies, chewing gum, soap dolls, a rusty medal, a broken watch, and a chain. Jem must have put them away somewhere. I stopped and looked at the tree one afternoon. The trunk was swelling around the cement patch. The patch itself was turning yellow. We had almost seen him a couple of times, a good enough score for anybody. But I still looked for him each time I went by. Maybe someday we would see him. I imagined how it would be when it happened. He'd be sitting in the swing when I came along. "Howdy-do, Mr. Arthur," I would say, as if I had said it every afternoon of my life. "Evening, Jean Louise," he would say, as if he had said it every afternoon of my life. "Right pretty spell that we're having, isn't it?" "Yes, sir, right pretty." I would say, and I'd go on my way. It was only a fantasy. We would never see him. He probably didn't. He probably did go out when the moon was down, gaze upon Miss Stephanie Crawford. I'd have picked somebody else to look at, but that was his business. He never gazed at us. You aren't staring at that. You aren't starting that again, are you? Said Atticus one night when I expressed a stray desire just to have one good look at Boo Radley before I died. If you are, I'll tell you right now, stop it. I'm too old to go chasing you off the Radley property. Besides, it's dangerous. You might get shot. You know, Mr. Nathan shoots at everything, every shadow he sees, even shadows that leave size 4 barefoot footprints. You were lucky not to be killed. Dude. So Atticus just said, you remember when they snuck into the garden at night? Of course you do. Dill and Scout and Jem. And they were trying to peek in the shutters. And they made a whole bunch of noise and they had to run away. And Jem's pants got caught on the fence and Mr. Radley shot at him. Well, Atticus knows. And he just told him for the first time. It's been years ago. And he just said, he shoots at shadows, even shadows that leave small footprints the size of little kids like yourselves. You were lucky you weren't killed last time. So he's one of those guys that, I don't know, man. So he knows what they did wrong, but he doesn't just beat him over the head with it. He doesn't punish him. He doesn't do anything like that. He doesn't hit him with his ring hand or anything because he understands that they have learned from their mistake and that he doesn't have to do anything to discipline them. And that's pretty good parenting, to be honest with you. That's hard when you step back and take the burden off of yourself and put the burden of learning onto your actual child. That's some good parenting. And that's why I say Atticus Finch, beast. Okay? So anyway, we move on. I hushed then and there. At the same time, I marveled at Atticus. This was the first he had let us know that he knew a lot more about something than we thought he knew. And it happened years ago. Not only last summer, no, summer before last, when time was playing tricks on me. I must remember to ask Jen. So many things happened to us. Boo Radley was the least of our fears. Atticus said he didn't see how anything else could happen. Things had a way of settling down, even after time, or especially after time had passed. People would forget that Tom Robinson had existed or was ever brought to their attention. Perhaps Atticus was right, but the events of the summer hung over us like smoke in a closed room. The adults in Maycomb never discussed the case with Jem and me. It seemed that they discussed it with their children, and their attitude must have been that neither of us could have helped having Atticus for a parent, so their children must be nice to us in spite of him. The children would never have thought that up for themselves. Had our classmates been left to their own devices, Jem and I would have had several swift, satisfying fistfights apiece and ended the matter for good. As it was, we were compelled to hold our heads high and be respectfully a gentleman and a lady. In a way, it was like the era of Mrs. Henry Lafayette DeBose, without all her yelling. There was one odd thing, though, that I never understood. In spite of Atticus's shortcomings as a parent, people were content to re-elect him to the state legislature that year, as usual, without opposition. I came to the conclusion that people are just peculiar. Yeah, I hear you on that one. People are weird. Let's see. I lost my spot. People are peculiar. I withdrew from them and never thought about them until I was forced to. I was forced to one day in school. Once a week, we had current events period. Each child was supposed to clip an item from the newspaper, absorb its contents, and reveal them to the class. This practice allegedly overcame a variety of evils. Standing in front of his fellows encouraged good posture and gave a child poise. Delivering a short talk made him word conscious. Learn his current events strengthened his memory. Being singled out made him more than ever anxious to return to the group. The idea was profound, but as usual in Maycomb, it didn't work very well. In the first place, few rural children had access to a newspaper, so the burden of current events was borne by the town children, convincing the bus children more deeply that town children got all the attention anyway. So there's a little bit of a class divide there, like a little wage divide, classism. The rural children who had usually brought clippings from what they called the grit paper, a publication spurious in the eyes of Miss Gates, our teacher. Why she frowned when the child recited that the grit paper, I never knew. But in some way, it was associated with liking fiddling, eating syrup biscuits for lunch, being a holy roller, singing sweetly sings the donkey, and pronouncing it donkey, all of which the state paid teachers to discourage. So, in other words, the grit paper, whatever that is, I've never actually researched it, but it's kind of country, and they're trying to take the country out of the country people because it makes them sound ignorant. So they're trying to get them to speak better and, think more. Even so, not many of the children knew what a current event really was. Little Chuck Little, 100 years old in his knowledge of cows and their habits, was halfway through an Uncle Matchel story when Mrs. Gates stopped him. Charles, that is not a current event. That is an advertisement. Cecil Jacobs knew what one was, though. When his turn came, he went to the front of the room again. Old Hitler, Adolf Hitler, Cecil, said Miss Gates. One never begins with old anybody. Yes, ma'am, he said. Old Adolf Hitler's been persecuting, Cecil. No, Miss Gates, it says here, well, anyway, old Adolf Hitler has been after the Jews and he's putting them in prisons and he's taking away all their property and he won't let any of them out of the country. He's washing all the feeble-minded and washing the feeble-minded? Yes, ma'am, Miss Gates. I reckon they don't have the sense enough to wash themselves. I don't reckon an idiot could keep himself clean. Well, anyway, he's talking about brainwashing, but anyway, he's confused. Unreliable narrator and all that. Well, anyway, Hitler started a program to round up all the half-Jews, too, and he wants to register them in case they might cause him any trouble. And I think that's a bad thing, and that's my current event. Very good, Cecil, said Mrs. Gates. Puffing, Cecil returned to his seat. A hand went up in the back of the room. How can he do that? Who do what? Said Miss Gates patiently. I mean, how can Hitler just put a lot of folks in a pen like that? Looks like the government would stop him, said the owner of the hand. Hitler is the government, said Mrs. Gates, and seized an opportunity to make an educational dynamic. She went to the blackboard and printed democracy in large letters. Democracy, she said. Does anybody have a definition? Us? Somebody said. I raised my hand, remembering an old campaign slogan Atticus had told me about. What do you think it means, Jean Louise? Equal rights for all, special privileges for none, I quoted. Very good, Jean Louise, very good. Mrs. Gates smiled. In front of democracy, she printed, We are a. Now, class, say it all together. We are a democracy. We said it. Then Mrs. Gates said, That's the difference between America and Germany. We're a democracy and Germany is a dictatorship. Dictatorship, she said. Over here, we don't believe in persecuting anybody. In the United States, we don't believe in persecuting anybody. Ever. Because we're all equal. Right? I bet you can think of some examples where that doesn't always hold true, but I'm not going to ask for those right now. At any rate, there are no better people in the world than the Jews, and Hitler doesn't think so. And why Hitler doesn't think so is a mystery to me. An inquiring soul in the middle of the room said, Why don't they like the Jews, you reckon, Miss Gates? I don't know, Henry. They contribute to every society they live in, and most of all, they're deeply religious people. Hitler's trying to do away with religion, so maybe he doesn't like them for that reason. Cecil spoke up. Well, I don't know for certain, he said. They're supposed to change money or something, but that ain't no cause to persecute them. They're white, ain't they? Miss Gates said, When you get to high school, Cecil, you'll learn that the Jews have been persecuted since the beginning of history. That the Jews have been, even driven out of their own country. It's one of the most terrible stories in history. Time for arithmetic, children. Now, did you see the inconsistency pop up right there? They said, it's terrible what's happening to those poor Jews. After all, they're white, aren't they? That whole skin tone thing, man, it's amazing. It's really amazing. I mean, if you get to know someone who is a person of color, which maybe some of you do and maybe some of you don't. But the more you get to know people, the more you realize that people are just people. It doesn't matter what color we are or what religion we are or any of that stuff. I mean, it changes the way we view ourselves and it changes the way the world views us. And it changes the amount of trauma that we have to go through on a daily basis. And some of us have more privileges than others, but deep down inside, we're just people. Human beings are just human beings, and we've always just been human beings. And it is absolutely like the most twisted, I don't know, I don't want to say miracle because a miracle is typically a good thing. It's the most twisted occurrence in history that at some point, a bunch of white Europeans said, black people gross. And that started racism. Like, how? I don't know. It's crazy. Okay, moving on. As I had never liked arithmetic, I hear you there, Jean Louise, I spent the period looking out the window. Been there too. The only time I ever saw Atticus scowl was when Elmer Davis would give us the latest on Hitler. Atticus would snap off the radio and say, humph. I asked him once why he was impatient with Hitler, and Atticus said, because he's a maniac. This would not do. I mused as the class proceeded with the sums. One maniac and millions of German folks. Looks to me like they'd shut Hitler up in a pen instead of letting him shut them up. There was something else wrong. I would ask my father about it. I did, and he said he could not possibly answer my question because he did not know the answer. But it's okay to hate Hitler. It is not, he said. It's not okay to hate somebody. Atticus, I said, there's something I don't understand. Miss Gates says it was awful, Hitler doing as he does. She got real red in the face about it. I should think that she would. But, yes. Well, nothing, sir. I went away not sure that I could explain to Atticus what was on my mind. Not sure that I could clarify what was only a feeling. Perhaps Jem could provide the answer. Jem understood school things better than Atticus did. Jem was worn out from a day's water carrying. There were at least 12 bananas peeled on the floor by his bed surrounding an empty milk bottle. What's you stuffing for? I asked. Coach says if I can gain 25 pounds by year after next, I can play, he said. This is the quickest way. If you don't throw it all up. Jem, I said, I want to ask you something. Shoot. He put down his book and stretched his legs. Miss Gates is a nice lady, ain't she? Why, sure, said Jem. I liked her when I was in her room. She hates Hitler a lot. What's wrong with that? Well, she went on today about how bad it is, him treating the Jews like that. Jem, it's not right to persecute anybody, is it? I mean, we have mean thoughts. I mean, have mean thoughts about anybody, even, is it? Gracious no, Scout. What's eating at you? So Scout says, this lady, she's a good lady, right? In general, she's a pretty good lady. And they're both like, yeah, she's a good lady. But once again, just like Atticus told us earlier in this book, people have flaws. Everybody has flaws. And some flaws are bigger than others because those flaws may affect the people around them. And if your flaws are affecting the people around you negatively, that's when it becomes a problem. If you're only being self-destructive with your ignorance, that's your business. Live and let live. But if you're trying to push your views or persecute people because of your views, that's an issue. Okay? So that's what Scout's trying to figure out right now. Well, coming out of the courthouse that night, Miss Gates was going on down the steps in front of us. You must have seen her. She was talking to Miss Stephanie Crawford. I heard her say, it's time somebody taught them a lesson. They were getting way above themselves. And the next thing you think they're going to do is try to marry us. So she was happy that Tom Robinson was arrested. And that was because she thought that black people were becoming too human and that, heaven forbid, they might actually want to start having interracial relationships. Ignorance, man. I don't have anything else to say about that. Jem was suddenly furious. He leapt off the bed and grabbed me by the collar and he shook me. I never want to hear about that courthouse again. Ever, ever. You hear me? You hear me? Don't you ever say a word to me about that again. You hear? Now get out. Imagine Scout. She just asked her big brother something. He's like, sure, ask me a question. And then he just lost his mind, just started screaming and ranting and shaking her. Like, boom, from 0 to 100 all of a sudden. I was too surprised to cry, except I crept out of Jem's room and shut the door softly, lest undue noise set him off again. Suddenly tired, I wanted Atticus. He was in the living room, and I went to him, and I tried to get up in his lap. Atticus smiled. You're getting so big now. I'll just have to hold a part of you. He held me close. Scout, he said softly, don't let Jem get you down. He's having a rough time these days. I heard you back there. Atticus said that Jem was trying hard to forget something, but what he was really doing was storing it away for a while, until enough time passed. Then he would be able to think about it and sort things out. When he was able to think about it, Jem would be himself again. So that process that he's talking about right there, that's the end of the chapter, by the way. That process of tragedy plus time, well, that is how we sort out our emotions or our grieving process. Jem's essentially grieving the death of not just Tom Robinson, but really his childhood innocence, because that's the day that the world really and truly let him down. When he realized that the world wasn't perfect and it wasn't the way he thought it was, and that not all people were good. He didn't really believe his father until he experienced it himself. And that's so often the case with so many things in life. You take things in and you gain knowledge from teachers and parents and friends, but you don't have that wisdom. You don't have a true understanding of something until you've experienced it yourself. Unfortunately, the experience that Jem had was traumatizing. He's essentially suffering from PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. And he needs time to sort through that before he's going to be able to figure out how to interact with the world and deal with the world. Scout and Jem, they both said that the whole situation with Tom Robinson, although time has passed, is still hanging above them like a smoky haze in a room. They're in a holding pattern. They have not gotten closure yet. And without closure, you can't really learn that lesson. You can't put it to bed. You can't be done with it. So neither one of them is really done with it. It's still kind of a raw wound in the heart. So here's my question. It has to do with the chapter and the overall theme of the chapter. Given what I've discussed with you about the different parts of the chapter, okay, we had, well, I'm not going to get too much into it because it's all in the video for you. My question to you is this. What is the overarching theme of this chapter? And I want you to back that up with a few different examples from the chapter or from my video. What is repeated throughout the chapter? And what is the author trying to teach us about it? That's it. Not a short video, 23 minutes, but not the longest I've ever done. So that's all I've got for you tonight. I hope you enjoyed this chapter. It's, like I said, it's not a long one, but it's got some moments that should make you go, wow. It kind of puts you in the time period in America when we were both disgusted with what Hitler was doing to the Jewish people, but at the same time, persecuting and traumatizing the people of color in this nation, be they Black or Native American or any other person. So think about that, and you tell me, what's the main theme? How do I know that? And what is the author trying to teach us about it? Okay, you guys have a great night, good day. Get out there and enjoy some sunshine because it's not raining. It's not supposed to rain. It's going to get cold later in the week. So soak up some sun. I love you. Stay clean, stay healthy, stay safe. Peace.